On this episode of AV Week, we talk about international shows, non-North American shows, IBC and ISE, and why integrators should pay attention to them. Also talking about what is better, category cable or fiber, and inspirational AV. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 309, recorded Friday, July 28th, 2017. Video culture.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Crestron and by Peerless AV, the official outdoor display provider of Daytona International Speedway.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. Welcome. Thanks so much for listening and watching. With us to talk about the news and information this week, first and foremost, her name is Dawn Mead. You know her as AV Dawn. She's the host of AV Social and is a great marketing person out of the Washington, D.C. area. How are you, ma'am?
Very good, thanks. How about yourself today?
Doing well,
Good.
Not too shabby. Also with us is an old friend who is now works for QSC, but he and I are both former technology managers, so that's actually where we hooked up for the first time. His name is Mike Brandis. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Tim?
Doing good. And last but not least, this guy's a newbie. I actually met him through AVI Systems and the AVI Live programs this spring. His name is David Maldo. Welcome, sir.
Hey, good to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We got to hang out a little bit at InfoComm as well, so that was kind of cool. First story up here we have, this is from our friends over at AV Network. The story we're using is about Vitech, but that's not really the bigger story. A trade show called IBC 2017 is being held at the RAI in Amsterdam. And for those of you who follow AVNation and for those of manufacturers who go, the RAI is actually where ISE is held, Integrated Systems Europe, the European trade show that's put on by InfoComm and CEDIA every single February. We've been covering it for 3 years now. We're actually already planning. It's the end of July, and we're already planning for next February. The question I have, though, and I want to ask all three of you in turn here is, and Dawn, I want to start with you. Should North American integrators and AV professionals pay attention to shows like this? And IBC, just to have the definition here, and I apologize I didn't do that straight up. IBC is the European version of NAB, National Association of Broadcasters here in the States. That happens every April in Vegas. This is the International Broadcasters Convention in Amsterdam. So this is the European version of NAB. ISE is the European version of InfoComm and CEDIA kind of put together. Should integrators in North America pay attention to these international shows and the products that are developed there and released there?
Well, I mean, honestly, we are more and more a global market. Everybody knows this. The world has shrunk considerably with the advent of the internet and, distance communication like we're doing right now. It is very important to find out what's going on in those other markets, because not just the products available in these other regions of the world, but also more and more we're looking at companies that are merging together, integrators that are being bought by larger companies, integrators that are trying to expand their reach beyond just the shores of North America. And I think it's important to know what's going on in other parts of the world. You wouldn't want to walk into a job that you know nothing about, as a new employee, walk in the first day and not have a clue. And it's sort of the same thing on a larger scale. It's if you're an integrator that's been working in North America, you're suddenly bought by a venture capital company that wants to expand.
Or Legrand, who's out of France.
Exactly. And you need to know what's going on in these other parts of the world, because we tend to be very insular here in America and in North America. We tend to think about what's going on with us specifically. And there's so much here, little regional pockets of oddness, as it were. Doing business in the DC area is completely different than doing business in the Midwest, which is completely different than doing business in the South or the West Coast. So we tend to think in those terms. But it's the same thing on the global scale, more so when you add in language barriers and cultural traditions, that you almost have to go to one of these shows at least once before you jump into competing on that scale. And nowadays, with the way the industry is changing and evolving so quickly, you're going to have to start competing on a larger scale. So I think it is important.
My QSC exhibits at ISE. You guys will be there in 2018. You and I got to hang out for a little bit at this year's show in Amsterdam. How do you connect with an international audience? How do you connect with an international client base when it comes to those shows?
Yeah, it's drastically different. I will say the ISE show from the Infocom show as a manufacturer. I never went when I was my previous manufacturing role. The go-to-market strategy for, I would say, 80% of the manufacturers in our industry is different in Europe. And the buying habits are very different in Europe. In Europe, you're very distributor-based. Your integration clients and your end-user clients connect with the distributor. Sure UK, a Proditel, a Polar Audio in the UK, kind of those type companies. They drive the sale, not necessarily the manufacturer for most of those scenarios. So it's, from my standpoint as a manufacturer, it's very valuable for us to have international shows, obviously, and not just the ISCs and the Infocoms or the IBCs or the NABs, but there's other markets that are completely different. India, which is a huge growing economy and something that you'd be silly to overlook as a manufacturer. Integrate in Australia is another great show. But from a US integrator standpoint, yeah, you should absolutely be paying attention to these shows. You'd be a fool not to be paying attention to ISE if your business is only systems. So why would you, miss the IBC show? Crestron this year announced 3 or 4 different products at ISE. QSC announced a huge technology announcement running our QSys software on a Dell server at ISE. And it's not just because the time aligned, it's because they're huge shows in their own right. Twice the size, 1.5 times the size of the North America show, give or take. It's tremendously valuable. And we're, North American, manufacturers are no longer holding back products to wait for the summertime show here. So North American integrators shouldn't be waiting until Infocom to get all their news, and they should be paying attention to these other shows around the globe.
Well, not for nothing. One of the things that talking with the ISE director, Mike Blackman, there was over 100 product announcements at this year's Integrated Systems Europe in February. Obviously, QSC did a few of them. Crestron had some, AMX had some, Kramer, a bunch of people had some. David, when it comes to connecting an audience, right, and how do you connect the dots with your audience for something happening around the world, something happening internationally, to help them understand that this impacts them?
Well, I really have to treat it as a global audience, and I can do that because a lot of these services and products that I cover are available globally. But for Europe in particular, talking about like the ISE show, from the perspective of an American integrator, I think it's crucial to go there. I know that, and my website covers AV, but I focus particularly on video conferencing. So much video conferencing technology came out of Norway. So to ignore Europe, you're really missing out on what's the next thing that's going to come. I mean, from Tamberg to Akano to Pexip, there's a lot of Norwegian code in our video conferencing. So from a product perspective, we need to be going to these shows around the world because the technology isn't just coming from us. And also, sometimes Europe, I think it serves as a test lab for new services. Sometimes, for whatever reason, a new vendor might have channel in Europe or connections in Europe and get a start there, and they'll get customers and a product and a service going. And an American service provider, American integrator, can kind of look and see what's working and what's not working for them, and decide whether or not they want to start, because they all want to come over to the U.S. We're doing great in France, we're doing great in England, we're looking to go to the U.S. So we need to know what's working there and what our next opportunities are.
No, that is a very good point. In the fact that the North American market is still where a lot of things happen, but I would also argue that shows like IBC and ISE are becoming more and more important as a cycle, right? I mentioned IBC and NAB. are on two parts of the calendar for a reason, April and September. So our next article comes to us from our friends over at Commercial Integrator, and it was an interesting article to me, at least, because it starts a conversation that I want to have. And that is, what makes fiber better than category cable? First of all, that statement is a pretty substantial statement. They're saying, in that this is, category cable is not as good as fiber. A quote I want to bring up here actually is from Bob Michaels, the CEO of video distribution solutions provider AVWeek. Quote unquote, the advances in fiber over the last several years in terms of durability have improved tremendously. I think anybody considering putting in a network of 10 gigs or above, which you should probably be considering anyway, this is still his quote, should absolutely be considering fiber. So, Mike, from a technology standpoint, from a manufacturer standpoint, is fiber better than category cable? Why or why not?
You want a definitive answer on whether two competing technologies are one's better than the other? I will say this: fiber's come a long way in terms of being useful. It's more durable, certainly. It's easier than ever to terminate. You don't need to spend hours, sanding down the glass. In that regard, fiber's come a long way, and it's usable. Also, the data rate, we're about to exceed category cable. If you talk 40 gig network backplanes, which, by the way, that's a thing. We're talking 10 gig here, which still hasn't come to full adoption, but 40 gigs next. You're going to have to go to fiber at some point. Now, is fiber better?
Real quickly about the data rates, real quick, because they're already starting to do 40 gig category cable, and they're supposedly in the lab at IEEE is 100 gig category cable. In the lab, not even close to ready for prime time. So it's there, right? I have no idea what the connection point on that looks like. There's probably 15 different shields, and it's twisted beyond belief, but it's there.
Yeah, I'm just saying right now fiber is moving towards being more mainstream than it was, or it had very, we'll say, niche applications in the AV space, moving long distances. How often do you do that regularly? Not very. Being able to carry high data rates, which is great. But we've come a long way from the Fox boxes from Extron to now, we're using fiber not necessarily as a point-to-point transmission, but as a network transmission. You're seeing SFP cages on more products, things like that. That is where fiber's becoming more and more useful, is the ability to integrate in a fiber network instead of just fiber versions of category cable that we had all along. Now, why was category cable so ubiquitous? Because companies like Crestron and AMX and Extron, they built their video infrastructure for conference rooms, for classrooms, for digital signage off of category cable. It was DM, it was DGX, it was XTP. That's why category cable became so ubiquitous. And fiber's kind of getting away from that. It's easier to terminate. It's not, as expensive as it once was. A lot of the prohibitive factors of fiber are kind of going away.
I would agree with that. And one of the interesting things I saw come out of Infocom this year was Belden has a new termination kit. And it was less than 60 seconds for a termination point. I'm not making that. And I didn't do it because, good Lord, nobody wants me around glass. But it was 60 seconds on the show floor. I watched 2 or 3 integrators just kind of walk up and do it. And Belden's not a writer or anything like that.
Now that it's so easy to terminate, I mean, we remember 2013 doing cable testing on IMAX patterns at Crestron's booth, and whose cable was error free and who did that, and your skew terminate and all that. All those variables about category cable don't exist in fiber now that it's easy to terminate.
Yeah, and I still remember my first DME class, DMCE engineering, DMCE class. That was part of it. You had to terminate and you had to polish you had to cleave the end and polish it, and it was a good 15-20 minutes to terminate that cable, and you may have a point there. So
hard to believe that would be unreasonable in a 600 display installation.
Yes. Labor cost alone would eat you. Dawn has an interesting point of view, simply because she works and lives inside the Beltway, so there's a lot of government work. There's obviously security benefits to fiber, but Dawn, when you sit down, and whether it's a government client or not, how do you market this? How do you sell the benefits of both category and or fiber to a client looking at this, going, there are costs and benefits on here on both sides?
Well, I mean, it is sort of a juggling match or a thing. When you're dealing with the government, you're either coming at it from purely a cost standpoint, because God knows 3 bids, lowest bid wins, regardless of what happens beyond that bid a lot of times. But on the other hand, there are applications specifically in this region that have been doing nothing but fiber, not since category cable came around, but back when we were all doing 5-wire and copper and everything. Even then, when it was wickedly expensive and wildly difficult, fiber was what they were using. And that's anything with clearances, anything with major security. You're either running fiber, which can't be tapped into, or back in the day, we actually did a meeting room. It wasn't even a secure facility, but it was secure enough for a government contractor that we weren't allowed to core drill or use conduit or anything. All of our wire had to go from the equipment, just sort of be tacked along the wall where they could see every inch of it, and then to the table, because it had to be visible at all times. It was secure enough, and they weren't sure if occasionally a meeting would be held there that had a clearance. They had to have every piece visible, or you had to be fiber. And in situations, because in situations like that, fiber is a no-brainer. So really marketing it to your customer, it depends what was important. Do you want the absolute, totally secure, but wildly cost prohibitive one? For most people, cost prohibitive. Or do you want something that's really going to work? It's going to be able to be done quickly. That's what we're going to use. It's the standard for IT. Now that we're talking about this sea change where fiber's easy, fiber's quick, fibers, come down in cost, that it's more reasonable. If they have the budget and they're willing, man, go fiber, because for the moment, that's the biggest pipe you got, and it can go the distance, and it doesn't have a lot of the problems that CAT does. So I rather agree with the article, man. It's pretty superior at the moment, until the next thing comes along and everything changes yet again.
Yeah, until the next. Although the next thing, fiber's been around since the 70s, kids. So it's not like I don't know. All right, David, let's talk about video transport. What's the benefits here of transporting video versus on fiber versus Cat5 or category cable, period?
It's basically a capacity issue. It's my concern is, most of the traffic that we do at the office, the emails, the text messages, uploading a Word document, doesn't really take a lot of bandwidth. Even a company that doesn't do a lot of video, they'll find that a huge percentage, even a majority of the bandwidth they use is video. It just takes up a lot. I should know this, 1080p is how many millions of pixels, each one changing 30 times a second. That's a lot of information to go back and forth. And my concern is we're seeing the growth in video we've always been waiting for. Ever since the 1964 World's Fair, where AT&T showed the first video phone, and it was the year of video, and the next year was the year of video, and the next year of the year of video. Now we're seeing that growth, and not just with business video, with webinars and meeting rooms and things like this, but consumer video, YouTube Live, Periscope. People are getting comfortable on video and they're streaming. Everyone's doing it. So if we're becoming a video culture, and we're seeing just the tip of the growth now, and that's going to start using a lot of bandwidth, well, we better figure it out. And if fiber, which seems to be from this discussion in the article, kind of an inevitability, maybe we should get motivated to hurry up and make the change and prepare ourselves.
All right, very good. Last story here. I want to highlight something that our friends over at AV Magazine did. Clive Caldwell, who's become a good friend of AVNation, and we use their space at ISC, and they use our space at Infocom. He did an interview with Bell and Whistle, and the person he interviewed was a gentleman by the name of Gab Keen, talking about inspirational interactive exhibits, and the link we'll put on the show notes. But Dawn, I want to talk to you. Start with you here. As AV designers, as integrators, and even as end users here, what is the balancing act, I guess, between doing something like that's in the article. It's very interactive. It's using a lot of music and visuals to evoke emotion, and wanting that, right? Wanting the wow and telling the story, going back to the Tide conference of Infocom, using storytelling to really make AV pop. Balancing that with the cost, balancing that with stuff is great and it's awesome, it's groovy and it's incredible and it's awe-inspiring. It's also expensive. So how do we wrap that into a package that's not only desirable to our customers, but also palatable to their bottom line?
Well, it depends on your customer's end game.
Okay.
Are they looking to really have the immersive experience? Is their customer, whether it's an internal customer, coworkers, and so on, or whether it's people from the public coming in and people, businesses doing business with them, is it more important for them to get this experience to get across your vision? Or is it just a whiz bang, hey, we have a cooler lobby or boardroom than you do? And depending on what their actual end game is, that's going to make a difference. We live in a society now where, thanks to YouTube, thanks to the internet, we can see all the cool stuff that's possible all over the world. I literally just watched a video of one of our cousins that was at a Boy Scout thing, and the museum where they were had a sand map, like the special sticky sand that kids have, that was projected onto a topographic map. And you would walk up to it and push your hand in the sand and change the elevation.
Oh,
and as
wow.
you did that, the topographic map would change, and it would change color in that section. It was actually live reading the levels of the sand on the table, and then changing the projection to match it. You can see cool things like that from all over the world. Some airport in Singapore might have a really very cool OLED setup that we only dream about here. Or somebody who does something cool at a museum in Canada or wherever. We see all these experiences and we all want to take part in it. It's what I've been saying for years. Everybody needs AV, and now people are getting it, and everybody wants AV, and they want all of these cool things. And much like, having one of these drove the swipe wireless kind of video into the corporate world from the consumer world, the consumers are starting to see these cool whiz-bang things on YouTube, on TV shows, what have you, and they're starting to demand it.
Yeah, having a cell phone has really driven that.
Right. And so once the demand is there, once a customer is in a mall somewhere and gets a coupon sent right to their phone because they walked past the store, they're going to want that level of interactivity. They're going to want that experience again. And so the world of experiential marketing has exploded as the technology has exploded. And so more and more our customers are going to be realizing that this is an area they have to budget. If they want to take part in this revolution of experience and immersion for customers and for users, they're going to have to put in that budget. And that makes the sales job easy, because we can say, we can do that, or we could design something that'll emulate that, and we can do it for this much. It's just up to us to manage their expectations as what's actually available and what's Hollywood magic if they saw it on a movie.
Yeah.
And it's also up to us to balance we can get that done. It's going to cost this much. No, you can't budget this much and get this. So once we set those expectations and come through with them, the customers are going to start demanding it. They might not demand it for their boring boardroom right now or their little classroom, but more and more it's creeping in. It's coming. And so integrators, this is an area, as more integration firms are having problems, what with the consolidation of single SKU things that the IT department or the facilities department deploys themselves, and what's going to happen to our industry. You hear people crying. Here's the answer. Figure out these cool immersive technologies and then focus on that, because they will be coming.
Yeah.
And you can still charge for it.
You can. David, same kind of question here is how do you get, whether it's the Hollywood or it's you go to a hockey game, which is my current favorite experience of AV in the real world, and some really, really wicked things. And my favorite is still the Toronto Maple Leafs ice projection. I say that with my fingers crossed that the St. Louis Blues will actually figure out a way to do that here. how do you take that and walk your clients through, this is what's possible, and maybe give them 3 different levels, saying, here's what you're asking for and here's the price tag on that, but here's some other cool things in case that gives you sticker shock?
You know, well, one thing I love about this whole discussion is that we're talking about this from the experience point of view. 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be talking about products. How do you explain to a customer that this projector is better than that projector because it is a brighter bulb or whatever it is? And now we're really talking about the experiences, because we'll make it work. We have the technology, we have the services, we'll be able to figure it out. And it makes the sell, it makes it so much more compelling. I mean, there's the whole question of how much budget do you want to spend? Do you want to have a fancy video showing it, or do you want to just have a podcast where you talk about it? But I think the story is what is important. And when you present it to your clients, yeah, I guess you need to present the different levels of what they can afford and they can choose, but you really want to focus on the experience. One of the something that happened recently that I thought was very compelling at Enterprise Connect. Did you see Jens Meggers from Cisco? He was giving a demo of a keynote of the Sparkboard, and we see these all the time. And usually, what you see is a product demo. This is what the product does, and if you press this button, it does this, and if you press that button, it does that. And I thought this demo was so cool and different because it was an experience demo. He wasn't showing what the Sparkboard can do. He was giving a presentation, and the Sparkboard happened to be the right tool to use it. So he was showing this experience, and the technology was secondary to it. And I think, and maybe it's a little bit going off on a tangent, but I think that might be the future for AV. We're discussing I've been discussing with a lot of people, where are we going to go with an industry where the first thing you have to tell people is what AV stands for. And I think the future of it is, the technology is going to be easier. A Sparkboard doesn't require configuration. You hang it and you give it network and it runs Spark. So if we move toward this Apple model of products, what's the role of the integrator? And I think this is where it gets fun and exciting. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I think we're going to become the workflow experts, or it's one possibility for us. And I think this goes to what you were saying. When you go to your clients and say level 1, 2, 3, we're not going to be talking about, level 1 is this camera and this light and these shades. And
No.
We're going to be saying it's workflow 1. Maybe it's the Albright podcast management workflow for the podcast team, or maybe
good Lord, nobody wants that, dude.
Well, if you come up with something good, or the whoever salesperson comes up with a great methodology for managing a sales team every week, and around that is built the whiteboards you need, and the video you need, and the projectors you need, and the connections you need, and all the technology you need. But what we're selling and what we're excited about is how people is the experience.
Yeah. Mike, last question here. We'll let you all have the last word on this. As a manufacturer, and from a manufacturer standpoint, how do you help integrators do this, right? How do you help integrators sell experience? How do you help them sell not the boxes and the gizmos and the SKU numbers and the model numbers, but how do you sell them, this is what you want, this is the experience you want, you want networked audio, you want everything all in one, you want everything running on an IT framework, here you go. How do you help them sell that?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with we talk about products in our industry. There will always be a need for products. As much as integration firms say the margins on products are shrinking and products are going away, and that's a cause for concern. Those aren't going away. You'll always need devices. But a product that doesn't connect to a platform is beyond useless now, and even more so 5 years from now. So when you talk about selling experiences are iterative. On day 1, you might concept one thing, and then on year 2, it's completely different. And having a product that doesn't connect to a platform that's not extensible is prohibitive to that. So that's a real big barrier in our industry, whether you're in an immersive experience that Dawn talked about while she was casting some shade at the meeting room. But the meeting room has those. You talk about Minority Report, spawning Oblong. and the mezzanine product. Like that is an immersive experience in the meeting room, and probably the most successful and repeatable immersive experience in our industry today. If you talk about the whole of projection mapping in NBA and NHL facilities, you get 65 installs max. If you talk about meeting rooms that are using Oblong, I can guarantee you every year it's more than 65. So there's saying immersive things are only for big scale things like arenas or niche applications like museums is really damaging first and foremost. So as a manufacturer, you show value and immersive experiences in the day-to-day operations. A conference room that can be completely reconfigured on the fly to bring audio from the other side of the world. Things that are not your physical rooms are no longer for one purpose. You don't have a meeting room and then a video conferencing room and then a town hall room. Every room does all three of those at the same time if you're spending your money wisely.
Yeah.
So building products and platforms really that accommodate that. That's how you sell. You tell your integrator, here's how you provide value to this customer. You take this platform and then on the edge, you have these products. This one brings in HDMI to your platform. This one brings in camera signals. This one brings in analog audio, networked audio. That's the product. But the stuff in the middle, that's the platform. And really creating those immersive experience. I mean, there's a company out of the UK, Atmosphere, that uses Q-SYS audio processing and Shure microphones and some proprietary algorithms, and creates 3D immersive audio for video playback, for live venue experience, but also for the meeting room, a clearer and better experience than any meeting rooms ever had before. And I mean, that is the definition of a very cottage industry, and it's a very expensive solution, but people pay for it because it is immersive, because it is the experience they want. If you're in a long, narrow conference room, having 4 overhead speakers and 2 speakers on the wall used to be the way you did life, but now it's no longer acceptable when you're spending 6 hours a day in video conferences instead of 1 30-minute every week. Having bits and pieces that convert signal types or do A and B but don't really do anything doesn't help an integrator sell the immersive experience. So creating realistically a platform upon which you can build hardware devices that hang off, in the case of an audio product, or software-based applications to make a Dolby Atmos decoder. It doesn't have to be a separate piece of hardware. It can be a software application that runs on your existing hardware, and that's kind of how you provide value to somebody who wants to take a traditional conference room and turn it into a 70 channel audio playback room if you have the money.
If you have money, absolutely. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Miss Dawn Mead, thank you so much. How do people find you?
Well, you can find me on Twitter and all of the various social networks at AVDawn. And you can find me here on AVNation.tv. And that's the only info I'm going to give you because as of this afternoon, I'm a free agent. So if you are in the DC, Baltimore, Northern Virginia area looking for some marketing folk or some technology folk in general, I'm here. And if you're looking for a remote worker, I'm here as well. Once I get some new landing spot, I will share that info with you as well.
Yay.
In the meantime, at AVDawn is where you can find me.
All right, very good. Mr. Brandis, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
How do people find you and or QSC?
Mostly people just find me annoying.
Well,
but
that's beside the point.
On the internet, on Twitter, I'm at Mike Brandis AV. My company is QSC. You can find us at qsc.com/systems for the products on which I work. Or if you want to pick up some sweet, powered loudspeakers, we have those too, and amplifiers and cinema products, the whole range.
All right, very good. David Maldo, thank you, sir. I appreciate you joining us.
Oh, thanks. This was fun. And you can find out anything you need to know about me at letsdovideo.com and across social media at Let's Do Video.
All right, very good. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me on the Twitters because at this point in the season, I'm already grousing about the Chicago Bears and their lack of anything really, defense, quarterbacking, whatever. But go by the
reported to training camp, man.
Yes, they have, and it's already horrible. We're already 0-16. Dawn's a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and so she has nothing to complain about. Go by the website, AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Awful lot of talented folks have done an awful lot of hard work. I was not one of them, so give them the props that they are due. When you're there, check out our underwriters section. We appreciate them. These are the folks that support us financially to help us to do this. They helped us go to ISE and Infocom and CEDIA coming up the week of Labor Day this year. So check that out if you would, please. Also, I want you to do me a favor and check out a brand new program we have called a Daily Download. I call it a new program simply because it's a new podcast. It's 5 minutes every day of shows like AV Week and Dawn's AV Social and Live Life and State of Control. All of our various programs. We take a 5-minute segment of it, give it to you every single morning, and gives you kind of a sample of what we do. Plus, also talking about a specific topic or a specific problem in the world of AV. You can check us out on iTunes or any other podcasting app you have, or go by the website, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been AV Week.